brand new Will Smith Lamb, the Forbidden Library, and we're reading. That's not Pride and Prejudice, that's a spreadsheet. We're not reading the spreadsheet. We're just adding to the spreadsheet so that my total goes down. Because, as you can see, I'm on a webtoon kick at the moment. And we're going to add more of the webtoons I've been reading. But, welcome to the stream! Hello, normal size random. Hello, native gamer. Hello, anyone looking. Hello, anyone watching bots. As I said, we'll quickly update the spreadsheet, then we'll get on to some Pride and Prejudice. So what I've been reading, I add webtoons to this list every 20 chapters that I do them. Oh wait, what's this? Briny streaming? It's not Sonic. Are you okay? I know, right? I know, right? This week I played nothing but Sonic, but the day Sonic actually comes out, I should add Gerald's Diary. I did my best on that. It has been Sonic pretty much all this week, Native Gamer, except for when it was Ruiner, where it went really badly because I was so distracted by thoughts for Sonic. But we finished Shadow Generations, so I don't have to think about it so much. It won't obsess me so much. But we should definitely add that to the spreadsheet. First, I'm gonna add, I've read over 60 chapters of Leveling My Husband to the Max now, so I can add that 2 more times. A potato VTuber. I'm not normally a potato, but when I went off with some stress, I read a book. Let me go to another screen that has the book on it. Oh lordy, this is weird. But I read this book that was called Becoming Your True Self, a super amazing self-help book that totally is not sus. And it turned me into a potato. And next week, we're gonna put into planning some ways to turn myself back into human, because I would very much like to be human again. That would be lovely. The tea fairies may have given me mage hand, but it would be very nice to be able to use my actual hands again. But welcome. Tank in turtle. A tank in a turtle? Or a tank or turtle that is a tank. Hello Boris, welcome. So I've read Level Up My Husband to the Max. What are the other ones I read? I think I've read enough Charming Duke of the North that I can put that on again. Yes, I've read over 40 Charming Duke of the North, so that gets to go on there again. Yay! It is a webtoon, and it's by these guys, and it's a series. Yeah. What's the other one? And I forgot about one that I forgot about when I was updating this because I'd finished it up to its season break and it's just come back. It's called I Thought My Time Was Up, which has been a really fun one. And I've read over 60 of that, so it gets to get added 3 times. So 167, 168, 169 is going to be I Thought My Time Was Up. So this is a fun one. Hello, Native Gamer. Imagine meeting your Oshi and she's just a potato. Any like meet and greet I go to, I'll just put a potato on the table. I'll just draw a face and stick some glasses on a potato and just stick it on the table. And then put like a speaker next to the potato and hide behind the screen. That would be so good. That's how all my meet and greets will go now. It's by someone called Essie, and it is a series. So I Thought My Time Was Up was really fun. So it's about a noble lady who you'd pay to see that. Wonderful! Then I'll definitely do it. I Thought My Time Was Up about a noble lady who gets diagnosed with like a mana disease that gives her 3 months to live. Do you do all your streams under the soil in your garden while you're a potato? No, I do them in the Forbidden Library where I cannot leave. There probably is a garden in here somewhere I could have done my streams from over Halloween, but I didn't think of that. Next time I turn into a root vegetable, I'll do that. Though I'm not going to turn into a root vegetable again after this. Hi, Red Candy Guy, welcome. What was the other one? I did Charm and Jib of the North. I thought my time was over. I did Level Up with my husband. I haven't read enough Changing the Genre yet. That's not out enough yet. Okay, I think that's all of my webtoons. So the last thing I need to add is Dr. Gerald's Diary, bringing us to 170 things on my list that I have read since becoming a VTuber. Not really becoming a VTuber. Technically, I was a VTuber before I was in the Forbidden Library, but since debuting in this way, since the upgrade machine incident. Next year, I become a mince pie. Oh yeah, because there's nothing scarier than Christmas on Halloween. Do you think you can grow a whole garden of me? No! There's only one me. We can't have more me's. That's terrible. Dr. Gerald Robotnik's Diary. Game? What? A short story? I'll call it a short story. I don't know. It wasn't that long. I'm gonna say it's by Sega, and it was a standalone. Standalone. There we go. So we've done 170 books. We're gonna get that 200 book mark really fast. Yes, so in Shadow Generations, you can pick up pieces of Dr. Gerald Robotnik's diary. So that would be the Eggman we know, his grandfather. His diary. Let me just update my books until freedom. So that would bring me down to 830. 9,830 books to go. We're going a lot faster. Ever since I started reading more webtoons, suddenly we're going a lot faster. Anyway, it is time for the main event. Pride and Prejudice. I thought that said bro, now it comes out. Got really confused. Yes, bro was a popular term back in the day. No, definitely not. Giving might have been a popular term back then, with Darcy giving offence. But it was not at that point. So I'll do my best to do something of a summary, but this is 91% of the way through a rather chunky book that's taken us... How many streams now? This is our 12th stream reading this book, so you'll have to forgive me if this summary is missing some bits out. The most important parts is that Jane and Bingley are now together. They are going to be married as per they should be, even after everything that happened. While Elizabeth has not managed to pin down Darcy yet. They had a bit of a rough beginning. They also had the issue of Darcy very much not liking her family because her mum's the most embarrassing mother on the planet because she's so desperate to get her daughters married that it's just generally horrific gold digger behaviour. But she also had a visit from last stream. She had a visit from Darcy's aunt, Catherine Burr, a very, very, very powerful noble lady, who was like, "My God, you are not good enough for my nephew, and you should refuse because he is going to marry my daughter. Yes, we're going to marry the cousins because there was nothing wrong with that back in those days." So yeah. After that, Darcy is around, I think, where Elizabeth lives because he came over with Mr. Bingley to propose to her sister Jane. So we'll see what happens after that. Anything else, I will try to fill in as we go. Also, I have come down with the sickness, unfortunately. Jane Bingley ship has eaten good. They are. So I do apologise for sniffles and potentially the odd cough. But I have tea, I have water. We should be fine. This is all good. The discomposure of spirits which this extraordinary visit threw Elizabeth into could not be easily overcome, nor could she for many hours learn to think of it less incessantly. Lady Catherine, it appeared, had actually taken the trouble of this journey from Rostings for the sole purpose of breaking off her supposed engagement with Mr. Darcy. It was a rational scheme, to be sure, but from what the report of their engagement could originate, Elizabeth was at a loss to imagine, till she recollected that his being the intimate friend of Bingley, and her being the sister of Jane, was enough. At a time when the expectation of one wedding made everybody eager for another, to supply the idea, she had not herself forgotten to feel that the marriage of her sister must bring them more frequently together, and her neighbours at Lucas Lodge, therefore, for with the Collinses, the report, she concluded, had reached Lady Catherine, had only sent that down as most certain and immediate, which she had looked forward to as possible at some future time. I see, so it got down to the grapevine. Through the grapevine. In revolving Lady Catherine's expectations, however, she could not help feeling some uneasiness as to the possible consequences of her persisting in this interference. From what she had said of her resolution to the marriage, it occurred to Elizabeth that she must mediate an application to her nephew, and how he might take a similar representation of the evils attached to a connection that, with her, she dared not pronounce. She knew not the exact degree of his affection for his aunt, or his dependence on her judgment, but it was natural to suppose that he thought much higher of her ladyship than she could do, and it was certain that on enumerating the miseries of a marriage with one whose immediate connections were so unequal to his aunt would address him on his weakest side. With his notions of dignity, he would probably feel that the arguments, which to Elizabeth had appeared weak and ridiculous, contained much good sense and solid reasoning. If he had been wavering before as to what he should do, which had often seemed likely, the advice and entry of so near a relation might settle every doubt and determine him at once to be as happy as dignity unembellished could make him. In that case, he would return no more. Lady Catherine might see him in her way through town, and his engagement to Bingley, of course, again to Netherfield, must give way. If, therefore, an excuse for not keeping his promise should come to his friend within a few days, she added, I shall know how to understand it. I shall then give over every expectation, every wish of his constancy. If he is satisfied with only regretting me, then he might have obtained my affection and hand. I shall soon cease to regret him at all. Aww. If he doesn't turn up again, I'll know that he has given up on me. The surprise of the rest of the family on hearing who their visitor had been was very great, but they obligingly satisfied it with the same kind of superstition which had appeased Mrs. Bennet's curiosity, and Elizabeth was spared from much teasing on the subject. The next morning, as she was going down the stairs, she was met by her father, who came up the library with a letter in hand. "Lizzie," said he, "I was going to look for you. Come to my room." She followed him hither, and her curiosity to know what he had to tell her was heightened by the superstition of its being in some manner connected with the letter he held. It suddenly struck her that it might be from Lady Catherine, and she anticipated with dismay all the consequent explanations. She followed her father to the fireplace, and they both sat down. Then he said, "I have received a letter this morning that has astonished me exceedingly. As it principally concerns yourself, you ought to know its contents. I did not know before I had 2 daughters on the brink of matrimony. Let me congratulate you on a very important Darcy! Darcy! You did not, did you? Bro just sent a letter to her dad being like, hey, I want to marry your daughter. She said no to me. He probably didn't say that, she's already said no to me once, but Is he so afraid of her rejection again that he just went and sent a letter to Mr. Bennet rather than asking her again? The colour rushed to Elizabeth's cheeks in the instantaneous conviction of it being a letter from the nephew instead of the aunt, and she was undetermined whether most to be pleased that he explained himself at all, or offended that his letter was not rather addressed to herself than her father. I'm glad she's a little bit mad, because I would be. Well, now she's gonna reject him even harder. He should know better. He should know better, but apparently it's not from him if we read a little bit further, so it's fine. Remind me, what year does this take place? 1800s? I don't know if I could give you the specific year off the top of my head. Let me have a look. Let me do a quick Google for you. Let me Google. Jill the Hythe. Mr. Art. Mrs. Art. Their art. I don't know. When does Pride... 1913 publication date, so around that time. 1813. 1813, not 1913. Yeah, 1913. 1813! Why do I keep saying 19? I'm not a smart potato sometimes. I'm a little sick as well, so I just don't know. And I'm always happy to try to find the answer to questions. Okay. You look conscious. Young ladies have great penetration in such matters as these, but I think I may defer your stagnancy to discover the name of your admirer. This letter is from Mr. Collins. Oh my. Oh, and your name is written in Gaelic. It's hard unless you speak. Ah, that's nice. Jill Bacha. I can call you Jill. Hi, Jill. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a decent name. At least I am a kawaii potato. Yes. Not a smart potato, but a kawaii potato. Yeah. Brandy defaulting back to the decade of her youth. 1910s. Shut up. Shut up. Ain't that old. From Mr. Collins, and what can he have to say? Something very much to the propose, of course. He begins with congratulations on the approaching nuptials of my eldest daughter, of which it seems he has been told by some of the good-natured gossiping Lucases. I shall not sport with your impatience by reading what he has to say on the point. I shall not sport with your impatience. That is such a wonderful way of describing the way Mr. Collins speaks. I could imagine the paragraphs he wrote before he got to the fucking point. What he relates to yourself is as follows. Having thus offered you sincere congratulations of Mrs. Collins and myself on this happy event, let me now add a short hint on the subject of another, of which we have been advertised by the same authority. Your daughter Elizabeth, it is presumed, will no longer bear the name Bennet, after her eldest sister has resigned it, and the chosen partner of her fate may be reasonably looked up to as one of the most illustrious personages in the land. Can you possibly guess, Lizzie, who is meant by this? This young gentleman is blessed in a peculiar way with everything the heart of mortal can desire: splendid property, noble kindred, and extensive patronage. Yet, in spite of all these temptations, let me warn my cousin Elizabeth and yourself of what evils you may incur by a precipitate closure with this gentleman's proposals, which, of course, you will be inclined to take immediate advantage of. Have you any idea, Lizzie, who this gentleman is? But now it comes out. My motive for cautioning you is as follows. We have reason to imagine that his aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, does not look on the match with a friendly eye. Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. Now, Lizzie, I think I have surprised you. Could he, or the Lucases, have pitched on any man within the circle of our acquaintances, whose name would have given the lie more effectually to what they related? Mr. Darcy, who never looks at any woman but to see a blemish, and who probably never looked at you in his life. It is admirable. Well, back in the early-ish 1800s, marriage was more like a contract anyway. Not that I agree with that, but it was. Kind of what that actor said in the movie, you give me your daughter, I'll give you a couple cows. It was a business contract, so it wasn't unheard of for the suitor to write to the woman's father. It isn't, but this is Elizabeth Bennet we're talking about. She deserves better. It might be good for the time, but she deserves better. Elizabeth tried to join her father's pleasantry, but could only force one most reluctant smile. Never had his wit been directed in a manner so agreeable to her. Are you not diverted? Oh yes, pray read on. After mentioning the likelihood of this marriage to her ladyship last night, she immediately, with her usual condescension, expressed what she felt on the occasion. When it became apparent that on the score of some family objections, some people do that. I believe there are still some very rich families who probably still operate like this. I have no idea, but it would not surprise me if there were still some, like, rich people who still act like this. When it became apparent that, on the score of some family objections on the part of my cousin, she would never give her consent to what she termed so disgraceful a match, I thought it my duty to give the speediest intelligence on this to my cousin, as she and her noble admirer may be aware of what they are about, and not run hastily into a marriage which has not been properly sanctioned. Mr. Collins moreover adds, I am truly rejoiced that my cousin Lydia's sad business has been so well hushed up, and I am only concerned that their living together before the marriage took place should be so generally known. I must not, however, neglect the duties of my station, or refrain from declaring my amazement at hearing that you received the young couple into your house as soon as they were married. It was an encouragement of vice, and I had been the reactor of Longbourn. Had I been the reactor of Longbourn, I should very strenuously have opposed it. You ought certainly to forgive them as a Christian, but never to admit them in your sight. You should forgive them, but pretend they don't exist. Yay, religion. You don't talk about Lydia. No. We don't talk about Lydia. Or allow their names to be mentioned in your hearing. That is his notion of Christian forgiveness. The rest of the letter is only about his dear Charlotte's situation, and his expectations of a young olive branch. But Lizzie, you look as if you did not enjoy it. You are not going to be, mishish, I hope, and pretend to be affronted at an idle report. For what do we live, but to make sport of our neighbours, and laugh at them in our turn? I'm a romantic to agree. I always wanted that lifelong last for last time. Yeah, that's how it should be. Oh, Elizabeth cried, I am exceedingly diverted, but it is so strange. Yes, that is what makes it amusing. Had they fixed on another man, it would have been nothing but his perfect indifference and your polite dislike. Make it so delightfully absurd. Oh, Daddy, you know nothing. Mr. always just sitting in his library. He knows nothing of what his daughter truly wants and what of Darcy's feelings actually are. I just want someone to watch Godzilla movies. Who doesn't want someone to watch Godzilla movies with? I'm very lucky that I do. I must, much as I abominate writing, I would not give Mr. Collins' correspondence for any consideration. Nay, when I read a letter of his, I could not help giving him the preference, or even over Wickham, much as I value the impudence and hypocrisy of my son-in-law. And pray, Lizzie, what said Lady Catherine about this report? Did she call to refute her consent? Yes, she did. To this question, his daughter replied only with a laugh, and as it had been asked without the least suspicion, she had not duressed by his repeating it. Elizabeth had never been more at a loss to make her feelings appear what they were not. I like the Godzilla movie. The recent ones are very silly and wonderful. Everyone should like Godzilla movies. There's something in it for everyone. Mostly giant monsters, which is really cool. Although I think a lot of people would like the Godzilla -1. That one was very cool. I think even non-Godzilla fans would like that one because it's very serious and very scary. What was I up to? Yeah, only one made you tear up. The one with Matthew Broderick. They killed him. Oh no, I don't think I've seen that one. It was necessary to laugh when she would rather have cried. Her father had most cruelly mortified her by what he said of Mr. Darcy's indifference, and she could do nothing but wonder at such a want of penetration, or fear that perhaps instead of seeing too little, she might have fancied too much. Aww. -1, especially in black and white, is phenomenal. Shin Godzilla might not be for everyone, but also very much worth checking out. Next, reading with you, Bry versus Other Voices. And the challenge is to figure out what makes sense of the mess. Then multiple stories overlap. Makes sense. Doesn't make sense. I don't know how I would even set that up as a thing. Instead of receiving any such letter of excuse from his friend, as Elizabeth half expected Mr. Bingley to do so, he was able to bring Darcy with him to Longbourn before many days had passed after Lady Catherine's visit. The gentleman arrived early, and before Mrs. Bennet had time to tell him of their having seen his aunt, of which her daughter sat in momentary dread, Bingley, who wanted to be alone with Jane, proposed their all walking out. It was agreed to. Mrs. Bennet was not in the habit of walking. Mary could never spare time, but the remaining 5 set off together. Bingley and Jane, however, soon allowed the others to outstrip them. They lagged behind, while Elizabeth, Kitty, and Darcy were to entertain each other. Very little was said by either. Kitty was too afraid to talk to him. Elizabeth was secretly forming a desperate resolution, and perhaps he might be doing the same. Monsters are born too tall, too strong, too heavy. That is their tragedy. I really enjoyed that one. I hear they're making another one-off, the same type of movie. That would be cool. They already did Higuchi and Shin Ultraman, and Anno did Shin Kamen Rider. Oh, a Kamen Rider, you say? I am always very interested in a Kamen Rider. I've enjoyed what Kamen Riders I have seen. I would like to see more, but they're also a giant pain in the ass to find anywhere to stream without going through 1,000 ads. It's simple. Just get recordings of me reading and audio recordings, and then just everything at the same time. Your challenge is, where's Waldo, but with the voices. God, that sounds so stressful to listen to. They walked towards the Lucases because Kitty wished to call upon Maria. Wow. And as Elizabeth saw no occasion for making it a general concern, when Kitty left them, she went boldly on alone with him. Oh my, so bold of her. She's so bold. We love Elizabeth. Now was the moment for her resolution to be executed, and while her courage was high, she immediately said, Mr. Darcy, I am a selfish creature, and for the sake of giving relief to my own feelings, care not how much I may be wounding yours. I can no longer help thanking you for your unexampled kindness to my poor sister. Ever since I have known it, I have been most anxious to acknowledge to how grateful I feel it. Were it known to the rest of my family, I should not have merely my own gratitude to express. I am sorry, exceedingly sorry, replied Darcy in a tone of surprise and emotion, that you have ever been informed of what may, in a mistaken light, have given you uneasiness. I did not think Mrs. Gardiner was so little to be trusted. I just realised your nose is white. Is that not or an error in the model? I believe that's the shading on my nose would normal be. It's not because I'm partially sick. I didn't add it because I'm partially sick, but if that's what you want to interpret it as, go for it. Because apparently potatoes can get colds, which really sucks, bro. It really sucks. I thought at least if I was a potato, I'd be immune to human diseases, but apparently not. Absolutely sucks. You must not blame my aunt. Lydia's thoughtlessness first betrayed to me that you had been concerned in the matter, and, of course, I could not rest till I knew the particulars. Let me thank you again and again, in the name of all my family, for that generous compassion which induced you to take so much trouble and bear so many mortifications, for the sake of discovering them. You can add a napkin and a tissue. It fits the sick boogers. And it's normally used for eating, so matters. I don't have a tissue. Oh no, we don't have a tissue. It's fine. I'll just have a booger on my face. You just gotta live with it. Live with my grossness. If you will thank me, he replied, let it be for yourself alone, that the wish of giving happiness to you might add force to the other inducements which lead me on. I shall not attempt to deny, but your family owe me nothing. Much as I respect them, I believe I thought only of you. Ah, Emmeken! Sneezy Rose Smith. Elizabeth was too much embarrassed to say a word. After a short pause, her companion added, You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever. Let's go! Elizabeth, feeling all the more than common awkwardness and anxiety of the situation, now forced herself to speak, and immediately, though not very fluently, gave him to understand that her sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period to which he alluded, as to make her receive, with gratitude and pleasure, his present assurances. The happiness to which this reply produced was such that he had probably never felt before, and he expressed himself on the occasion as sensibly and as warmly as a man violently in love can be supposed to do. Had Elizabeth been able to encounter his eyes, she might have seen how well the expression of heartfelt delight diffused over his face became him. And though she could not look, she could listen, and she told her feelings, which, in approving of what importance she had to him, had made his affection every moment more viable. This is interesting. Admit, I thought you just left your mouse pointer and it looks like a note. I want to make a comment on the literature here. Never ever in any modern writing would we have the proposal, arguably the thing that this whole book has been building up to, as a summarized paragraph. No dialogue, just a summarized paragraph. You'd never get away with that now. English writer teachers would be after your shit if you did this. How can you do that? That's telling, not showing. That's that's telling, not showing. You're supposed to show, not tell. Blah blah blah. It's just very interesting. It changes. It's just something that's changed very much on the emphasis of how we write after now, and the rules we've put on ourselves for storytelling since this book has come out. Very interesting. Back in the day, you could take some interesting moves around. You could, and people would still love it, because obviously this is Pride and Prejudice. This is the most famous romance novel of all time. And we didn't even get dialogue for the proposal, which is wild. They walked on without knowing in what direction. There was too much to be thoughtful and felt and said for attention to any other objects. She soon learnt that they were indebted for their present good understanding to the efforts of his aunt. What an absolute trooper that aunt is. Who did call on him in her return journey through London, and there relate her journey to Longbourn, its motive, and the substance of her conversation with Elizabeth, dwelling empathetically on every expression of the latter, which, in her ladyship's apprehension, particularly denoted her perseverance and assurance, in the belief that such a relation must assist her endeavours to obtain that promise from her nephew, which she had refused to give. But, unluckily for her ladyship, its effect had been exactly contrariwise. That's a word. I mean, Cormac McCarthy used punctuation and he won a Pulitzer, so yep, that's fair. Didn't catch what was going on. This is the big moment, and I was like, wait, what? This is it? I know, right? That they are now engaged. It taught me to hope, said he, as I had scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before. I knew enough of your disposition to be certain that had you been absolutely irrevocably against me, you would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine, frankly and openly. Ha ha! So the fact that she didn't, like, say no, she was never going to marry him, to Lady Catherine was like, ha ha! She will marry me! Exciting. Elizabeth coloured and laughed as she replied, yes, you know enough of my frankness to believe me capable of that. After abusing you so abominably to your face, I could have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations. That's why we love you, Elizabeth. What did you say of me that I did not deserve? For I thought your accusations were ill-founded, formed on mistaken premise. My behaviour to you at the time had merited the severest reproof. It was unpardonable. I cannot think of it without abhorrence. We will not quarrel for the greater share of blame next that evening, said Elizabeth. The conduct of neither, if strictly examined, will be irreproachable. But since then we have both, I hope, improved in civility. I cannot be so easily reconciled to myself. The recollection of what I then said, of my conduct, my manners, my expression during the whole of it, is now, and has been many months, inexpressibly painful for me. Your reproof, so well applied, I shall never forget. Had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner, those were your words. You were not. You can scarcely conceive how they tortured me. Though it was some time, I confess, before I was reasonable enough to allow their justice. I was certainly very far from expecting them to make so strong an impression. I had not the smallest idea of their being ever felt in such a way. I can easily believe it, though you thought me then devoid of every proper feeling. Oh. I am sure you did. The turn of your countenance I shall never forget, as you said that I could not have addressed you in any possible way that would induce you to accept me. Oh, do not repeat what I said, then. These recollections do not do at all. I assure you that I have long been most heartily ashamed of it. Darcy mentioned his letter, did it? Said he. Did it soon make you think better of me? Did you, on reading it, give any credits to its contents? I mean, it did make her absolutely realise how big of a dum-dum she was. Or like how embarrassing her family actually really is. She explained what its effects on her had been, and how gradually all her former prejudices had been removed. I knew, said he, that what I wrote must give you pain, but it was necessary. I hope you have destroyed the letter. There was one part, especially the opening of it, which I should dread your having the power of reading again. I cannot remember some expressions which might justly make you hate me. The letter shall certainly be burned, if you believe it essential to the preservation of my regard, but though we have both reason to think my opinions not entirely unalterable, they are not, I hope, quite so easily changed as that applies. When I wrote that letter, replied Darcy, I believed myself perfectly calm and cool, but I am since convinced that it was written in a dreadful bitterness of spirit. The letter perhaps began in bitterness, but it did not end so. The adieu is charity itself. But think no more of the letter. The feelings of the person who wrote and the person who received it are now so wildly different from what they were then, what their every unpleasant circumstance attending it ought to be, forgotten. You must learn some of my philosophy. Think only of the past as its remembrance gives you pleasure. I cannot give you credit for any philosophy of the kind. Your retrospections must be only totally void of reproach. That the contentment arising from them is not of philosophy, but of what is much better, of ignorance. But with me it is not so. Painful recollections will intrude, which ought not to be repelled. Darcy, you saying you have intrusive thoughts? Because that's what that reads. Upon reflection, I wasn't as calm as I thought I was. And it was like Yakumi from Death Note in the chip scene. Eat a chip, write a name. Oh, so dramatic. It was great. A 10 out of 10 cut scene of how anime can make anything dramatic and exciting. But what is much better of ignorance? But with me, it is not so. I have been a selfish being all my life. In practice, though, not in principle. As a child, I was taught what was right, but I was not taught to correct my temper. I was given good principles, but left to follow them in pride and conceit. Unfortunately, an only son, for many years an only child, I was spoiled by my parents who thought good themselves. My father particularly, all that was benevolent and amiable. Here's another weird thing. Using brackets in speech. Why? What does that mean? If someone has brackets in speech, does that mean... We would never normally do that. It's very strange to use brackets in speech. I don't understand. Allowed encouraged almost taught me to be selfish and overbearing, to take for none beyond my own family circle, to think meanly of all the rest of the world, to wish at least to think meanly of their sense and worth compared to my own. Such I was from 8 to 8 and 20. It's usually for side notes and inner thoughts, right? Yeah, but I don't think we use it in speech so much now. Or at least if we do, it's usually outside the speech bubble. Like, we tend to use for inner thoughts now, like, italics now, rather than actual, but side notes, yeah, we definitely still use it for side notes. Fascinating. And such I might still have been, but for you, dearest, loveliest Elizabeth, what do I not owe you? My mouse just died, 1 second. I know I technically don't need it to read, but it is very helpful to help me keep my place. Sorry for that sound. That was my mic stand. Making funny noises. From here. There we go. Okay. What do I not owe you? You taught me a lesson, hard indeed at first, but most advantageous. By you I was properly humbled. I came to you without a doubt of my reception. You showed me how insufficient were all my pretensions to please a woman worthy of being pleased. So she got over her prejudices, and he got over his pride, and now they're together. Had you then persuaded yourself that I should? Indeed I had. What will you think of my vanity? I believed you to be wishing, expecting of my address. My manners must have been in fault, but not intentionally, I assure you. I never meant to deceive you, but my spirits might often lead me wrong. How you must have hated me after that evening. Hate you? I was angry, perhaps, at first, but my anger soon began to take proper direction. I am most afraid to ask what you thought of me when we were at Pemberley. You blamed me for coming. No, indeed, I felt nothing but surprise. Your surprise could not be greater than mine, in being noticed by you. My conscience told me that I deserved no extraordinary politeness, and I confess that I did not expect to receive more than my due. My object, then, replied Darcy, was to show you, by every civility in my power, that I was not so mean as to resent the past, and I hoped to obtain your forgiveness, to lessen your ill opinion, by letting you see that your reproofs had been attended to. How soon any other wishes introduced themselves, I can hardly tell, but I believe in about half an hour after I had seen you. Then he told her of Georgina's delight in her acquaintance, and of her disappointment at its sudden interruption, which naturally leading to the course of that interruption, she soon learnt of its resolution following her from Derbyshire in quest of her sister, had been informed before he quitted the inn, and that his gravity and thoughtfulness there had arisen from no other struggles than what such propose must comprehend. She expressed her gratitude again, but it was too painful a subject to each to be dwelt on farther. After walking several miles in a leisurely manner, and too busy to know anything about it, they found at last, on examining their watches, that it had been time to be home. What could have become Mr. Bingley and Jane was a wonder which introduced the discussion of their affairs. Darcy was delighted with their engagements. His friend had given him the earliest information of it. "I must ask whether you were surprised," said Elizabeth. "Not at all. When I went away, I felt it would soon happen." Hello, Jake. Welcome. "That is to say, you had given your permission." I guessed as much. And though he exclaimed at the term, she found that it had been pretty much the case. "On the evening before going to London," said he, "I made a confession to him, which I believe I ought to have made long ago. I told him of all that had occurred to make my former interferences in his affections absurd and impertinent. His surprise was great. He had never had the slightest suspicion. I told him, moreover, that I believed myself mistaken in supposing, as I had done, that your sister was indifferent to him, and as I could easily perceive that his attachment to her was unabated, I felt no doubt of their happiness together." Elizabeth could not help but smiling at his easy manner of directing his friend. "Did you speak from your own observations," said she, "when you told him that my sister loved him, or merely from my information last spring?" "From the former. I had narrowly observed her during 2 visits which I had lately made her here, and I was convinced of her affection." "And your assurance of it, I suppose, carried immediate conviction to him?" "It did. Bingley is most affectedly modest. His difference had prevented his depending on his own judgment in so anxious a case. But his reliance on mine made everything easy. I was obliged to confess one thing, which for the time, and not unjustly, offended him. I could not allow myself to conceal that your sister had been in town 3 months last winter. I had known it, and purposely kept it from him. He was angry, but his anger, I am persuaded, lasted no longer than he remained in any doubt of your sister's sentiments. He has heartily forgiven me now." Elizabeth longed to observe that Mr. Bingley had been a most delightful friend, so easily guided that his worth was invaluable, but she checked herself. She remembered that he had yet to learn to be laughed at, and it was rather too early to begin. In anticipating the happiness of Bingley, which of course was to be inferior only to his own, he continued the conversation till they reached the house. In the hall they parted. "Oh my, is that unable to utter a syllable? So that'll be Mrs. Bennet when they finally give her the good news." "My dear Lizzie, where can you have been walking to?" was a question which Elizabeth received from Jane as soon as she entered the room. From all others, when they sat down to the table, she had only to say in reply that they had wandered till she was beyond her own knowledge. She coloured as she spoke, but neither of them, nor anything else, awakened a suspicion of the truth. The evening passed quietly, unmarked by anything extraordinary. The acknowledged lovers talked and laughed. The unacknowledged was silent. "You have to tell everyone now! Come on." Darcy was not of a disposition in which happiness overflows in mirth, and Elizabeth, agitated and confused, rather knew that she was happy than felt herself to be, for besides the immediate embarrassment, there were other evils for her. She anticipated what would be felt in the family when her situation became known. She was aware that no one liked him but Jane, and even feared that the others it was a dislike which not all his fortune and consequence might do away. Oh, that's why. Best time to let someone know you're getting married is 22 minutes before the vows are taken. That might be what they're planning at this rate. At night, she opened her heart to Jane. Though suspicion was very far from Miss Bennet's general habits, she was absolutely incredulous here. You are joking, Lizzie. This cannot be. Engaged to Mr. Darcy? No, no, you shall not deceive me. I know it to be impossible. This is a wretched being indeed. My sole dependence was on you, and I am sure nobody else will believe me, if you do not. Yet indeed I am, in earnest. I speak nothing but the truth. He still loves me, and we are engaged. Jane looked at her doubtedly. Oh, Lizzie, it cannot be. I know how much you dislike him. You know nothing of the matter. That is all to be forgot. Perhaps I did not always love him, so well as I do now. But in such cases as these, a good memory is unpardonable. This is the last time I shall ever remember it myself. Miss Bennet still looked all amazement. Elizabeth again, and more seriously, assured her of its truth. Good heavens! Can it really be so? Yet now I must believe you, cried Jane. My dear, dear Lizzie, I would. I do congratulate you, but are you certain? Forgive the question. Are you quite certain that you can be happy with him? There can be no doubt of that. It is settled between us already that we are to be the happiest couple in the world. But are you pleased, Jane? Shall you like to have such a brother? Very, very much. Nothing could give either Bingley or myself more delight. But we considered it. We talked of it as impossible. And do you really love him quite well enough? Oh, Lizzie, do anything rather than marry without affection. Are you quite sure that you feel what you ought to do? Oh, yes, I will only think I feel more than I ought to when I tell you. What do you mean? Why, I must confess that I love him better than I do Bingley. I'm afraid you will be angry. My dearest sister, now be serious. I want to talk very seriously. Let me know everything that I am to know, without delay. Will you tell me how long you have loved him? It's a little soon to be aiming for happiest couple in the world. She's in the honeymoon phase. She just thinks it's gonna be good. It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began. But I believe I must date it from my first seeing his beautiful grounds at Pemberley. Another entreaty that she would be serious, however, produced the desired effect, and she soon satisfied Jane by her solemn assurances of attachment. When convinced on that article, Miss Bennet had nothing further to wish. Now I am quite happy, said she, for you will be as happy as myself. I always had a value for him. Were it for nothing but his love for you, I must always have esteemed him. But now, as Bingley's friend, and your husband, there can only be Bingley and yourself more dear to me. But Lizzie, you have been very sly, very reserved with me. How little did you tell of me of what passed at Pemberley and Lambton? I owe all that I know of it to another, not to you. Elizabeth told her motives of her secrecy. She had been unwilling to mention Bingley, and the unsettled state of her own feelings had made her equally avoid the name of his friend. But now she would no longer conceal from her his share in Lydia's marriage. All was acknowledged, and half the night spent in conversation. Good gracious, cried Mrs. Bennet, as she stood at the window next morning. If that disagreeable Mr. Darcy is not coming here again with our dear Bingley, what can he mean by being so tiresome as to always be coming? Oh my god, this future son-in-law of mine! How dare he be at my house? I had no notion but he would go shooting or something or other, and not disturb us with his company. What shall we do with him, Lizzie? You must walk out with him again, that he may not be in Bingley's way. You need to tell the family, Lizzie. You need to tell them. Elizabeth could hardly help laughing at so convenient a proposal, yet was really vexed at that her mother should be always giving him such hatred. As soon as they entered, Bingley looked at her so expressively, and shook hands with such warmth as left no doubt of his good information, and he soon afterwards said out loud, "Mrs. Bennet, have you no more lanes hereabout in which Lizzie may lose her way again today?" "I advise Mr. Darcy and Lizzie and Kitty," said Mrs. Bennet, "to walk to Oak Mount this morning. It is a nice long walk, and Mr. Darcy's never seen the view." "It may do very well for the others," replied Mr. Bingley, "but I am sure it will be too much for Kitty, won't it?" Won't it? Kitty owned that she'd rather stay home. Darcy professed a great curiosity to see the view from the mount, and Elizabeth silently consented. As she went upstairs to get ready, Mrs. Bennet followed her, saying, "I am quite sorry, Lizzie, that you should be forced to have that disagreeable man all to yourself." "Oh, no!" "But I hope that you will not mind. It's all for Jane's sake, you know. And there's no occasion for talking to him, except just now and then. So do not put yourself to inconvenience." Oh, Mum. Mum! During their walk, it was resolved that Mr. Bennet's consent should be asked for in the course of the evening. Elizabeth reserved to herself the application for her mother's. She could not determine how her mother would take it, sometimes doubting whether all his wealth and grandeur would be enough to overcome her abhorrence of the man. Bro, this woman suddenly loved a gambler and a paedophile for her marriage to her daughter because they were just getting married. She will forgive Mr. Darcy for existing if it means you're getting married. Elizabeth, I can get why Elizabeth is so nervous with everything she says. I get it. But logically, from an outsider's perspective, yes, she'll be fine. But whether she were violently set against the match or violently delighted with it, it was certain that her manner would be equally ill-adapted to do credit to her sense. That feels like a sick burn. It was certain that her manner would be equally ill-adapted to do credit to her sense. She will, in fact, go off the rails. Which direction, we're not sure. Darcy may be a butthead, but if I had to choose, Darcy would be better than Bingley. Bingley's a soft lad, but he is a little bit too easily influenced by his bestie. And Darcy does have more money. I mean, if you're just purely going on money, Darcy's got a lot of money. And she could no more bear that Mr. Darcy should hear the first raptures of her joy than the first vehemence of her disproportion. In the evening, soon after... Sorry, what was I... In the evening, soon after Mr. Bennet withdrew to the library, she saw Mr. Darcy rise and follow him, and her agitation on seeing it was extreme. She did not fear her father's opposition, but he was going to be made unhappy, and that it should be through her means that she, his favourite child, should be distressing him by her choice, should be filling him with fear and regrets of disposing of her, was a wretched reflection, and she sat in misery till Mr. Darcy appeared again. When looking at him, she was a little relieved by his smile. In a few minutes he approached the table where she was sitting with Kitty, and while pretending to admire her work, said in a whisper, "Go to your father. He wants you in the library." She was gone directly. Her father was walking about the room, looking grave and anxious. "Lizzie," said he, "what are you doing? Are you out of your senses to be accepting this man? Have you not always hated him?" Bless. I love, like, the dad and Jane are just like, Lizzie, I thought you hated him. Are you okay, sweetie? Are you trying to marry for money? We think better of that. How earnestly did she then wish her former opinions had been more reasonable, her expressions more moderate. It would have spared her explanations and professions, which was exceedingly awkward to give. But they were now necessary. She assured him, with some confusion, of her attachment to Darcy. Or, in other words, you are determined to have him. He is rich, to be sure, and you may have more fine clothes and fine carriages than Jane, but will they make you happy? Have you any other objection, said Elizabeth, than your belief of my indifference? None at all. We all know him to be a proud and pleasant sort of man, but this would be nothing if you do really like him. I do like him, she replied, with tears in her eyes. I love him. Indeed, he has no improper pride. He is perfectly amiable. You do not know what he really is. Then pray, do not pain me by speaking of him in such terms. Dad, stop embarrassing me. They're wondering what kind of Uno reverse Darcy pulled to get Lizzie to go. He's actually terrible and husband material. They really are. They're so worried that he, like, got some dirt on her or something like that. It's quite sweet, actually. Lizzie, said her father, I have given him my consent. He is the kind of man, indeed, to whom I should never dare refuse anything, which he consented to ask. I now give it to you, if you are resolved on having him. But let me advise you to think better of it. I know your disposition, Lizzie. I know that you could be neither happy nor respectable unless truly esteemed by your husband, unless you looked up to him as a superior. Your lively talents would place you in the greatest danger in an unequal marriage. You could scarcely escape discredit and misery. My child, let me not have the grief of seeing you unable to respect your partner in life. You know not what you are about. Elizabeth, still more affected, was earnest and solemn in her reply, and at length, by repeated assurances that Mr. Darcy was really the object of her choice, by explaining the gradual change which her estimation of him had undergone, relating her absolute certainty that his affection was not the work of a day, but had stood the test of many months' suspense, and enumerating with energy all his good qualities, she did conquer her father's incredulity, and reconcile him to the match. I like how much they want to make sure Lizzie is making a choice that will make her happy in the long run for the right reasons. I know! It's really sweet! Like I said, Jane and the dad are really, really sweet like that. It's the mum that's the biggest issue. She doesn't care as much about happiness, otherwise she would have had more of something to say with Lydia. Well, my dear, said he when she ceased speaking, I have no more to say. If this be the case, he deserves you. I could not have parted with you, my Lizzie, to anyone less worthy. Ah, she's such a daddy's girl. To complete the favourable impression, she then told him what Mr. Darcy had voluntarily done for Lydia. He heard her with astonishment. This is an evening of wonders indeed. And so Darcy did everything? Made up the match, gave the money, paid the fellow's debts, and got him his commission? So much the better. It will save me a world of trouble and economy. Had it been your uncle's doing, I must and would have paid him. But these violent young lovers carry everything their own way. I shall offer to pay him tomorrow. He will rant and storm about his love for you, and there will be an end of the matter. Oh, that's great, actually, because, you know, I didn't want to pay that. So now I know the really rich guy did it, and he wants your hand in marriage, then I have something even more valuable to give him. Ha ha ha. He then recollected her embarrassment a few days before on reading Mr. Collins' letter, and after laughing at her some time, allowed her at last to go, saying she quitted the room. If any young men come for Mary or Lizzie, send them in, for I am quite at leisure. Any other marriage proposals today? Elizabeth's mind was now relieved from a very heavy weight, and after half an hour's quiet reflection in her own room, she was able to join the others with tolerable composure. Everything was too recent for gaiety, but the evening passed tranquilly away. There was no longer anything material to be dreaded, and the comfort and ease and familiarity would come in time. When her mother went up to her dressing room at night, she followed her and made the important communication. Oh no. Its effect was most extraordinary, for, on first hearing it, Mrs. Bennet sat quite still, and unable to utter a syllable. Nor was it under many, many minutes that she could comprehend what she heard, though not in general backwards to credit what was for the advantage of her family, or that came in the shape of a lover to any of them. She began at length to recover, to fidget about her chair, get up, sit down, again wonder and bless herself. Good gracious, Lord bless me! Only think, dear me, Mr. Darcy! Who would have thought? And it is really true? Oh, my sweetest Lizzie, how rich and how great will you be! What pin money, what jewels, what carriages you will have! Jane's nothing to it, nothing at all. I am so pleased, so happy. Such a charming man, so handsome, so tall. I knew she'd do this. Oh, I really hate him, but he's so charming, so handsome, so tall. Oh, my dear Lizzie, pray apologise for my having disliked him so much before. I hope he will overlook it. Dear, dear Lizzie, a house in town, everything that is charming. 3 daughters married, 10,000 a year. Oh, Lord, what will become of me? I shall go distracted. See, oh, Mrs. Bingley, she does not care as long as they're married. This was enough to prove that her approbation need not be doubted, and Elizabeth, rejoicing that such an effusion was heard only by herself, soon went away, but before she had been 3 minutes in her own room, her mother followed. Lizzie, you didn't think you could get away, did you? My dearest child, she cried, I can think of nothing else. 10,000 a year, and very likely more. 'Tis as good as a lord, and a special license. You must and shall be married by a special license. But my dearest love, tell me what dish Mr. Darcy is particularly fond of, that I may have it tomorrow. Think of the money, child. You can't say Mrs. Bennet doesn't have her priorities. She's going on about the money so much. This was a sad omen of what her mother's behaviour to the gentleman himself might be, and Elizabeth found that, though in the certain possession of his warmest affection, and secure of her relations' consent, there was still something to be wished for. But the morrow passed off much better than she expected, for Mrs. Bennet luckily stood in such a way of her intended son-in-law that she ventured not to speak to him. Heck yes! Unless it was in her power to offer him any attention or mark her deference. Elizabeth had the satisfaction of seeing her father taking pains to get acquainted with him, and Mr. Bennet soon assured her that he was rising every hour in his esteem.
I admire all my 3 son-in-laws highly, said he. Wickham perhaps is my favourite, but I think I shall like your husband quite as well, Jane. Hello, Caedmon. Waves. Waves are being made. Elizabeth's spirits soon rising to playfulness again, she wanted Mr. Darcy to account for his having ever fallen in love with her. How could you begin? Said she. I can comprehend your going on charmingly when you had once made a beginning, but what could have set you off in the first place? A potato reading books, so now I can sleep safe. I'm not normally a potato. I'm normally a person, but we're yet to find a way to turn me back human. Hopefully next week we'll find a way to turn me back into a human. I cannot fix the hour or the spot or the look or the words which laid the foundation. It is too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew what had begun. My beauty you had early withstood. As for my manners, my behaviour to you was at least always bordering on uncivil, and I never spoke to you without rather wishing to give you pain than not. Now, be sincere. Did you admire me for my impertinence? Give couch potato a totally new meaning. Oh my god, yes it does. For the liveliness of your mind, I did. You may as well call it impertinence at once. It was very little less. The fact is that you were sick of civility, of defence, of officious attention. You were disgusted with the women who were always speaking and looking and thinking of your approbation alone. I roused and interested you because I was so unlike them. I was not like other girls, Mr. Darcy, and that is why you love me. Ha ha! Because I was so unlike them. You had been really amiable. You would have hated me for it. But in spite of the pains you took to disguise yourself, your feelings were always noble and just, and your heart, though you thoroughly despised the persons who so assiduously courted you. There I have saved you the trouble of accounting for it. And really, all things considered, I begin to think it perfectly reasonable. To be sure, you know no actual good of me, but nobody thinks of that when they fall in love. Is it okay to read up a book in a stream? Read up a book in a... Do you mean suggest a book in a stream? Yeah, you could suggest a book. I prefer suggestions in my Discord. Just because then it's like, I don't like forget it when I turn off the stream because I'm a silly billy like that I already have a potato brain, you know? It depends on the book. So, books I've read on my YouTube channel, I've gotten permission from the authors to read. This one is Pride and Prejudice, so it is free domain. So if a book is like over 70 years old, it is absolutely fine to read a book fully on stream because it's basically copyright free at that point. You're lucky. You could even propose to me, Mr. Darcy. I love it. She knows... Elizabeth knows her worth. Was there no good in your affectionate behaviour to Jane while she was ill at Netherfield? Dearest Jane, who could have done less for her? But to make a virtue of it by all means. My good qualities are under your protection, and you are to exaggerate them as much as possible, and in return, it belongs to me to find occasions for teasing and quarrelling with you as often as may be. And I shall begin directly by asking you what made you so unwilling to come to the point at last. What made you so shy of me when you first called and afterwards dined here? Why, especially when you called, did you look as if you did not care about me? Wait, you got permission from the authors to read a book on stream? Yeah, so most of the indie books I've read on stream, I got permission from the authors, because as being an indie author myself, I know the circles that those people go in, so It's not too difficult. Publishers are a bit more of a pain in the butt when it comes to getting permissions, because they don't respond to you most of the time. But indie authors are fine, because most of them are just like, free publicity, yes please. Some of them are okay with reading all of your books, some of them just, I got permission from Jane Austen herself, I wish. She's right though, she wasn't just fawning over him. She took the time to judge him overall. She didn't like him in the beginning, but also speaks to her being able to reevaluate him. Yes! She got over her first realization. She got over her prejudice. She's a wonderful lady. Elizabeth's a great. Elizabeth's a 10 out of 10 gal. I shall direct you by asking you what made you so unwilling to come to the point at last. What made you so shy of me when you first called, and afterwards dined here? Why, especially when you called, did you look as if you did not care about me? Because you were grave and silent and gave no encouragement. But I was embarrassed. So was I. You might have talked to me more when you came to dinner. A man who felt less might. Oh, lordy. Swallowed her pride and admitted she misjudged him. Yes, she did. How unlucky that you should have a reasonable answer to give, and that I should be so unreasonable as to admit it. But I wonder how long you would have gone on, if you had been left to yourself. I wonder when you would have spoken, if I had not asked you. My resolution of thanking you for your kindness to Lydia had certainly great effect. Too much, I'm afraid, for what becomes of the moral of if our comfort springs from a breach of promise, for I ought not to have mentioned the subject. This will never do. You need not distress yourself. The moral will be perfectly fair. Lady Catherine's unjustifiable endeavours to separate us were the means of removing all my doubts. I am not indebted for my past happiness to your eager desire of expressing your gratitude. I was not in a humour to wait for an opening of yours. My aunt's intelligence had given me hope, and I was determined at once to know everything. Lady Catherine has been of infinite use, which ought to make her happy, for she loves to be of use. But tell me, what did you come down to Netherfield for? Was it merely to ride to Longbourn and be embarrassed, or had you intended any more serious consequences? My real purpose was to see you, and to judge, if I could, whether I might ever hope to make you love me. My avowed one, or what I avowed to myself, was to see whether your sister was still partial to Bingley, and, if she were, to make the confession to him, which I have since made. I could see it working out long term. My fiancé and I did not like each other in the beginning for like a year. Not until we shared class again and got to know each other. We did change our minds. Yeah, love grows. Love isn't always there straight away. I didn't think about my fiancé much when we first met until like a few months in. And then even when we started dating, I wouldn't say I loved him until we got like a bit farther in. Love has got to grow and be tended to, and you need to spend time with it and get to know each other, and then eventually it'll grow into a lovely relationship. Shall you ever have the courage to announce to Lady Catherine what is to befall her? I am more likely to want time than courage, Elizabeth, but it ought to be done. And if you will give me a sheet of paper, it shall be done directly. And if I had not a letter to write myself, I might sit by you and admire the evenness of your writing, as another young lady once did. But I have an aunt, too, who must not be longer neglected. Yes, Mrs. Gardiner, the greatest wingman. For an unwillingness 1 second, I definitely need a drink. In fact, I'm gonna go on a very quick BRB. Oh, for us, I love you was awkwardly staged a few weeks before our first date. Oh my god. Very quick BRB. You can never really know when to exchange the I love you. You really don't. And all I can definitely say on the matter is don't pressure the other person to say it back. I had an ex who did that. And at the time I was too young and naive to know that was a very bad thing. And the whole relationship was a little bit toxic. Luckily, we were very long distance, so we didn't even see each other that many times before it exploded, so it was fine. What are we up to? From an unwillingness to confess how much her intimacy with Mr. Darcy had been overrated, Elizabeth had never yet answered Mrs. Gardiner's long letter. But now, having that to communicate which she knew would be most welcome, she was almost ashamed to find that her uncle and aunt had already lost 3 days of happiness, and immediately wrote as follows. I would have thanked you before, my dear aunt, as I ought to have done, for your long, kind, satisfactory detail of particulars, but, to say the truth, I was too cross to write. You supposed more than really existed, but now suppose as... Oh, hello, Tella! Thank you for the raid, really appreciate it. I hope you're feeling okay. But, to say the truth, I was too cross to write. You supposed more than really existed, but now suppose as much as you choose. Give a lose to your fancy. Indulge your imagination in every possible flight which the subject will afford, and unless you believe me actually married, you cannot greatly err. That's a wonderful way to say that. It's like, yeah, you suspected something that might not have been there. It's there. It's there. Just sunburned and tired? Oh, lordy. Surprised I got 3 hours out of me today. Well done. But look after yourself. Go chill. Make sure you moisturize that sunburn. You must write again very soon and praise him a great deal more than you did in your last. I thank you again and again for not going to the lakes. How could I be so silly as to wish it? Your idea of the peonies is delightful. We will go round the park every day. I am the happiest creature in the world. Perhaps other people have said so before, but no one with such justice. I am happier even than Jane. She only smiles. I laugh. Mr. Darcy sends you all the love in the world that can be spared from me. You are all to come to Pemberley at Christmas. Yours, etc. Mr. Darcy's letter to Lady Catherine was in a different style, and still different from either was what Mr. Bennet sent to Mr. Collins in return for his last. Oh, everyone getting the letters out. Dear Sir, I must trouble you once more for congratulations. Elizabeth will soon be the wife of Mr. Darcy. Console Lady Catherine as well as you can, but if I were you, I would stand by the nephew. He has more to give. Yours sincerely.
Oh my god. Bro, I know you warned me against this, but my daughter's getting married to him and you can't say nothing. Haha. That's fucking great. Mr. Bennet. Miss Bingley's congratulations to her brother on his approaching marriage were all that was affectionate and insincere. She wrote even to Jane on the occasion to express her delight and repeat all her former professions of regard. Oh god, yeah, Miss Bingley, she's gonna be so pissed. Jane was not deceived, but she was affected, and though feeling no reliance on her, could not help writing her a much kinder answer than she knew she was deserved. The joy which Miss Darcy expressed on receiving similar information was as sincere as her brother's in sending it. 4 sides of paper were insufficient to contain her delight, and all her earnest desire of being loved by her sister. Aww, baby Darcy's adorable. Before any answer could arrive from Mr. Collins, or any congratulations to Elizabeth from his wife, the Longbourn family heard that the Collinses were come themselves to Lucas Lodge. The reason of this sudden removal was soon evident. Lady Catherine had been rendered so exceedingly angry by the contents of her nephew's letter, that Charlotte, really rejoicing in the match, was anxious to get away till the storm was blown up. Yes, that's fair. That's very smart of Cat Charlotte. Charlotte's got a good head on her shoulders. At such a moment, the arrival of her friend was a sincere pleasure to Elizabeth, though in the course of their meetings she must sometimes think the pleasure dearly brought. Ah, let her die angry. Exactly. When she saw Mr. Darcy exposed to all the parading and obsequious civility of her husband, he bore it, however, with amiable calmness. He could even listen to Sir William Lucas when he complimented him on carrying away the brightest jewel of the country, and expressed his hopes of their all meeting frequently at St. James's with very decent composure. If he did shrug his shoulders, it was not till Sir William was out of sight. Mrs. Phillips's vulgarity was another, and perhaps a greater tax on his forbearance, and though Mrs. Phillips, as well as her sister, stood in too much away of him to speak with the familiarity which Bingley's good humour encouraged, yet which she did speak. She must be vulgar. I can't even remember who Mrs. Phillips was, I'm not gonna lie. Nor was her respect for him, though it made her more quiet, at all likely to make her more elegant. Elizabeth did all she could to shield him from the frequent notice of either, and was ever anxious to keep him to herself, and to those of her family with whom he might converse without mortification. And though the uncomfortable feelings arising from all this took from the season of courtship much of its pleasure, it added to the hope of the future.
She looked forward with delight to the time when they should be removed from a society so little pleasing as either, to all the comfort and elegance of their family party at Pemberley. Yay! Look at all the people, holy shit. Happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her two most deserving daughters. I know what that sentence means, but that sounds so harsh, really, doesn't it? I got rid of my two daughters. They deserve it. Again, just changes in language and just the way the sentence is structured means it. No, I know it means something completely different, but that's the way my brain took it. With what delighted pride she afterward visited Mrs. Bingley, and talked of Mrs. Darcy, may be guessed. I wish I could say, for the sake of her family, that the accomplishment of her earnest desire in the establishment of so many of her children produced so happy an effect, as to make her a sensible, amiable, well-informed woman for the rest of her life, though perhaps it was lucky for her husband, who might not have relished domestic fealty so in so unusual a form, that she was occasionally nervous and invariably silly. Mr. Bennet missed his second daughter exceedingly. His affection for her drew him ofter from home than anything else could do. He delighted in going to Pemberley, especially when he was least expected. Aw, poor Mr. Bennet and his favourite daughter. Mr. Bingley and Jane remained at Netherfield only a 12-month. So near a vicinity to her mother and Merton relations was not desirable even to his easy temper or her affectionate heart. The darling wish of his sister was gratified. He brought an estate in a neighbouring county to Derbyshire, and Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other. Kitty, to her very material advantage, spent the chief of her time with her two elder sisters in society so superior to what she had generally known. Her involvement was great. She was not of so ungovernable a temper as Lydia, and, removed from the influence of Lydia's example, she became, by proper attention and management, less irritable, less ignorant, and less insipid. From the further disadvantage of Lydia's society, she was, of course, carefully kept, and though Mrs. Wickham frequently invited her to come and stay with her, with the promise of balls and young men, her father would never consent to her going. Occasionally nervous and invariably silly. You're not wrong! That is a great descriptor of me, but shush. Mary was the only daughter who remained at home, and she was necessarily drawn from the pursuit of accomplishments by Mrs. Bennet, being quite unable to sit alone. Mary was obliged to mix more with the world, but she could still moralize over every morning visit. And as she was no longer mortified by comparisons between her sister's beauty and her own, it was suspected by her father that she submitted to the change without much reluctance. As for Wickham and Lydia, their characters suffered no revolution from the marriage of her sisters. He bore with philosophy the conviction that Elizabeth must now become acquainted with whatever of his ingratitude and falsehood had before been unknown to her, and, in spite of everything, was not wholly without hope that Darcy might yet be prevailed on to make his fortune. The congratulatory letter which Elizabeth received from Lydia on her marriage explained to her what, by his wife at least, if not himself, such a hope was cherished. The letter was to this effect: "My dear Lizzie, I wish you joy if you love Mr. Darcy half as well as I do my dear Wickham. You must be very happy. It is a great comfort to have you so rich, and when you have nothing else to do, I hope you will think of us. I am sure Wickham would like a place at court very much, and I do not think we shall have quit money enough to live upon without some help." Oh, you married the rich man, Lizzie! Any place would do, of about 300 or 400 a year, but however, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it, if you had rather not. Yours, Lydia. As it happened that Elizabeth had much rather not, she endeavoured in her answer to put an end to every entreaty and expectations of the kind. Such relief, however, as it was in her power to afford, by the practice of what might be called economy in her own private expenses, she frequently sent them. It had always been evident to her that such an income as theirs, under the direction of two persons so extravagant in their wants, and heedless of the future, must be very insufficient to support. And whenever they changed their quarters, either Jane or herself were sure of being applied to for some little assistance towards discharging their bills. Their manner of living, even when the restoration of peace dismissed them to a home, was unsettled in the extreme. They were always moving from place to place in quest of a cheap situation, and always spending more than they ought. His affection for her soon sunk into indifference. Hers lasted a little longer, and in spite of her youth and her manners, she retained all the claims to reputation which her marriage had given her. And though Darcy could never receive him at Pemberley yet, for Elizabeth's sake he assisted him further in his profession. Lydia was occasionally a visitor there, when her husband was gone to enjoy himself in London or Bath, and with the Bingleys they both of them frequently stayed so long that even Bingley's good humour was overcome, and he proceeded so far as to talk of giving them a hint to be gone. Miss Bingley was very deeply mortified by Darcy's marriage, but as she thought it advisable to retain the right of visiting at Pemberley, she dropped all her resentment, was fonder than ever of Georgina, almost as attentive to Darcy as heretofore, and paid off every arrear of civility to Elizabeth. I think we're in the last sort of summaries. It's going over all the characters now and sort of what happens to them. Pemberley was now Georgina's home, and the attachment of the sisters was exactly what Darcy had hoped to see. They were able to love each other, even as well as they intended. Georgina had the highest opinion in the world of Elizabeth, and at first she often listened with astonishment bordering on alarm at her lively, sportive manner of talking to her brother. He, who had always inspired in herself a respect which almost overcame her affection, she now saw the object of open pleasantry. The book equivalent of the voiceover at the end of the movie. Exactly. That is what is happening right now. We only have 2% of the book left. We're finally finishing it! Today! Oh god, what am I going to read next week? Holy shit, I need to decide what I'm reading. Oh no. I've been reading this book so long, I haven't had to think about, like, lining up another book in forever. Oh lordy. Oh well, I'm sure I'll find something. Oh, I have an idea actually. Cool. Not telling you what it is though. Her mind received knowledge which had never before fallen in her way. By Elizabeth's instruction, she began to comprehend that a woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself. Read Dracula, that's what I'm reading right now. No. The benefit of a long series, not have to think of what's next. It is. It was really nice, especially when a lot of my other books were only lasting like 3 or 4 streams. So it feels like I had to find one really fast. Lady Catherine was extremely indignant on the marriage of her nephew, and as she gave way to all the genuine frankness of her character, in her reply to the letter which announced its arrangement, she sent him language so very abusive, especially of Elizabeth, that for some time all intercourse was at an end. But at length, by Elizabeth's persuasion, he was prevailed on to overlook the offence and seek reconciliation, and after a little further resistance on the part of his aunt, her resentment gave way, either to her affection for him, or her curiosity to see how his wife conducted herself, and she consented to wait on them at Pemberley. In spite of that pollution which its woods had received, not merely from the presence of such a mistress, but the visits of her uncle and aunt from the city. 1 second. With the Gardiners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Elizabeth, really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude toward the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. The end! Oh my god, we did it. Holy shit, we did it. We read all of Pride and Prejudice, end of Pride and Prejudice Gutenberg book. So, if you don't know, Project Gutenberg is a wonderful website where it's just full of free, royalty-free books. You can read any special, any classic you can think of is there. Oh, I need to sneeze. Excuse me. But I did mute it, so you didn't actually hear it. But we did do it! We got through the whole thing. Oh my gosh, and we just got a raid. Steph 2! Thank you for the raid, but you just got here at the end of the book! Raiding party, I do apologize. You just missed the end. But, oh, thank you for the follow! Hello! Welcome, welcome, welcome. We just finished reading Pride and Prejudice. And it was great. No, I was so excited. I'm sorry! This is my 12th stream of this bad boy. I can read the last bit for you. I'm not normally like this. I'm not normally a potato. I read a sussy book. I'll show you the book. I'll show you. Na. This one. Please ignore the shitty stuff. Becoming Your True Self. Super amazing self-help book that is totally not sus. And it turned me into a potato. Next week we'll be doing some... If anyone has any ideas how to turn me back to human, let me know. We have... Because it turned me into a potato when I said potato in Latin 3 times. 4 times? 5 times? Was it 5 times? 5 times. 12. I've been reading Jane Eyre. We're going on 7th stream at the 16th chapter. Oh, they're big old books, aren't they? This is the biggest one I've ever read on stream, I think. I don't think any of them have gone this big. Hello, Dover Bear with Melps. Welcome, and thank you for the follow. Appreciate it, thank you. Yes, but delightful. 422 pages. Nice. I don't know what I'm reading next. Lots of Project Gutenberg stuff. But we got the nice illustrated version. So I did think about, should we have a look? Should we have a nose around Project Gutenberg? Should we do that? We have like 10 minutes left of the stream. Let's do that. Let's get Project Gutenberg up. Let's make a little wish list of things we want to read. Project Gutenberg. Brag. That is definitely how you say it. Getting big. What's in the top 100? Top 100 in Project Gutenberg. Let me just get it on the screen for you guys. Which one is it? Which one is it? Not that one. Not that one. Not that one. So many Chromes that I have open right now. That one. Found it! Oh lord, that's big. Okay, so we read Frankenstein, so we've done the most popular one already. Romeo and Juliet, I don't really... Shakespeare would be fun to read, but I really don't know if Romeo and Juliet's the one. Because, like, would this not be a script rather than a book? If you did that one? That would be fun to do as a collab thing. Like, read a script with someone on stream. That would be fun. Moby Dick is one I've considered. Because I've never actually read Moby Dick. I know a lot of people do it in school, but I never did. So that's a bit of a, like, cultural miss that I have. Oh wait, we can add it to my 100 books. Let me get my spreadsheet back up again. 100 books. We need to add it to the spreadsheet. Never read Moby Dick? Cool. The spreadsheet. Hide that again. 171. Pride. And I want the fancy and. Where's the fancy and again? There's the fancy and. Prejudice. It was a novel. It was by Jane Austen. Is that how we spell Jane Austen? Let me have a look. Austen. And it was standalone. Whoop! Nice. So that brings us to 9,820. Crap, I am mute. Sorry about that. I muted myself to oh, it's because I pressed the number 9. I'm a dum-dum. When I pressed that 29, that's what happened. I muted myself. This is why you should pick better keybinds for your stuff. That's why you shouldn't have your mute button on something you press, and I keep intending to change it and then forgetting, because I'm a smart cookie like that sometimes. Smart potato. You thought your speakers had died. Nope. Just me being silly. Anyway, I was reading the description of the Miss Middlemarch because I didn't know what Middlemarch was. So, it's about a young girl grapple with her search for love and purpose in societal expectations. The novel addresses themes of marriage, ambition, and the intersection of personal and social values in a rapidly changing world. At the start of the novel, we are introduced to Miss Brooke, who is depicted as a strikingly beautiful and intelligent young woman, yet may be seen as eccentric due to her lofty aspirations regarding and disregard for social norms. She lives with her sister Cecilia and their uncle Mr. Brooke in a quiet country house, harbouring dreams of making significant impact on the world. As the opening chapters unfold, we see her rejection of traditional feminine pursuits and her desire to be with a man of intellect who can match her aspirations. Important characters such as the learned Reverend Edward Casaubon and the kind Sir James Chetham emerge, each representing different paths and values that will challenge Dorothea in her quest for fulfillment. The complexities of their interactions are foreshadowed early on, setting the stage for a rich exploration of human relationships and personal growth. This is an automatically generated summary. Thank you, automatically generated summary. Speaking of classic books, what about reading Wuthering Heights? Is it on the Gutenberg? Let's have a look. Wuthering Heights. It's there. What is it about? Let's have a look. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte is a novel penned in the early 19th century. The story centers around the intense and turbulent relationships among the residents of Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, particularly focusing on the emblematic figure Heathcliff and his connection to Catherine Earnshaw. It's a wonderful website. You should all just don't know what to read. Just open Project Gutenberg and go. There should be a random button. I would love, you know how like SCP has a random button? I would love for Project Gutenberg to have a random book button. That would be so good. It delves into themes of love, revenge, and haunting consequences of past actions, set against the backdrop of the desolate Yorkshire moors. The beginning of Wuthering Heights introduces us to Mr. Lockwood, who has recently taken a rental at Thrushcross Grange. That's going to be a fun thing to say. And decides to visit his reclusive landlord, Mr. Heathcliff, at Wuthering Heights. Lockwood's encounter with Heathcliff is marked by unease, revealing a hostile atmosphere filled with mistrust and discontent. The narrative hints at Heathcliff's complicated past as an orphan, taken in by the Earnshaw family, setting up an exploration of social hierarchies and emotional scars that form the crux of the novel. As Lockwood navigates his burgeoning curiosity about these charged family dynamics, he inadvertently becomes entangled in the brooding past that shapes the characters' present lives, notably those of Heathcliff and Catherine. That does sound really cool, actually. I'm gonna write that one down, then I don't forget it, cause potato brain. So Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte even. Wuthering Heights. Emily Bronte. Dot. 2 dots on the E. Very important. Okay. What else we got going on here? The Blue Castle. Was that the one Tella was reading? Maybe. Then Complete Works of Shakespeare. That one would be a chunky boy. I bet that's a fat book. Does it have, like, how many pages it would be? No, it doesn't tell me how long it is. I wish it would. How would you trounce that last name? With great difficulty. Little Women? Oh, that's interesting. A Room with a View. I vaguely remember hearing about that. A Room with a View by E.M. Foster is a novel written during the early 20th century, which explores themes of social conventions and personal freedom. Are there any, like, fantasy novels we can get? There's so many that are just, like, high society and stuff, which is fun and all. But I'd really like to... Can we get into, like, some fantasy shit? Bookshelves. You've seen the movie A Room with a View. That was where I'm getting it. Classic fantasy. Exactly. Let's see what we can find. There's got to be a way to search, like, genre, browsing options. Let's search. Language. It needs to be in English, you know, otherwise I can't read it. Category. Audiobook. No, we don't want that. LC. File type. No. Full text search. There's gotta be some. There is a random book button! Holy shit, let's go. The Parasite. by Arthur Conan Doyle. Like, the horror ones are probably the closest we get to fantasy novels and stuff. International short stories and general short stories. The Lion and the Unicorn. I mean, that sounds pretty fantasy. What's that? The Lion and the Unicorn by Richard Harding Davis is a novel written during the late 19th century. The story unfolds in London and revolves around the experiences of various characters, including Captain Carrington and an American lodger named Philip Carroll, as they navigate personal and social struggles amidst the backdrop of war and romance. At the start of the novel, I mean, yeah, that sounds not as fantasy as I'm like, it's got a unicorn in the title, I wanted fantasy, okay? See if they have any Gorman-Gast books. Oh yeah, link the fantasy one for me, please, please, please. Alright, hi, welcome to the Discord. Do link. Yes, they tend to be fantastical. Is it a subject that I think that would be the Wheat Princess? What is that? The Wheat Princess by Jean Webster is a novel written in the early 20th century. The story revolves around an American family, the Copliers, and their experience as they spend a summer in an Italian villa, highlighting themes of wealth, privilege, and social responsibility. I see. Drop the link. Well, let's go. Thank you. Da 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 da. Ooh, it's marvelous. I mean, there's oh god, Legends of Arthur and His Knights. Oh, and the Death of Arthur. Oh my god, I forgot about that. Robin Hood, of course. There's so many in here. I was like, oh yeah, because I was trying to think of like fantastical ones that would have been like, you know, obvious, but I forgot. Oh, I'd love to read those. I love Arthur's stuff. The four Arthurian romances. Dorothy and the Wizard. Obviously, just general fairy tale stuff. I could go through this whole section very easily. 51 Tales. Mainly Arthurian tales, and I am so in for figuring out Arthurian stuff. Or we could get really into some Wizard of Oz lore too. Oh, that'd be so much fun. And the Nightlands, yes. The Wallet of Kai Lung. I would love to read some more international ones as well. Mirror of Congo, that kind of stuff. Oh my god. But some of these are redone as well. The real Wizard of Oz, yes. That was something, that's one of the ones I'm considering doing next, is a fairy tale. A particular fairy tale, which may or may not be related to something that I may be releasing next week. Maybe. So, let me see what they've got in that respect. 1 second. Maybe Brothers Grimm? Is it double M? Red Riding Hood. No records! Lord Dunsky. Lord Dunsany. Oh, Dunsey. We have an author. Ooh, Time and Gods. Ooh. I might have to do some research on where to start.
but that looks very interesting. Book of Wonder, Gods of Pengang. This is the kind of crap I wanted. Heck yes. There's a bookshelf. Children's myth and fairy tales. Anderson fairy tales. Oh, little tiny grandpa with a heart of glass. But anyway, I do actually kind of need to end the stream. I got distracted for a hot minute. I was having too much fun looking for books. But unfortunately, we do need to end the stream there. Thank you to anyone in the chat. Thank you to anyone who liked. Thank you to anyone who watches the VOD. I really appreciate you coming and interacting with my content, no matter how you do it. I'm going to see what classic science fiction they have there for my own reading. It's a good resource. Highly recommend it. Lovecraft was very heavily inspired by Dunsany, especially for his fantasy stories. Ooh, that's cool. I'll definitely have a look at that. I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna write down the name, otherwise I'm gonna forget. I'm gonna forget, and then I'll never look at it, and then you'll like tell me another time, and I'll be like, oh yeah, you mentioned that. What was it? Lord Dunsany. We're gonna be so cultured after this, you don't even know. Cultured reading. Yes. If you have not already, when it comes to the stream, if you're on YouTube, if you would be so kind as to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you are on Twitch, if you'd be so kind as to follow the channel. I know a lot of you have already during the stream, and I really thank you for that. Highly appreciate it. If you would like to support this potato in her quest to try get minimum wage from her streaming, because that would be lovely, you can help her in many ways. You can help her by getting YouTube membership, where you get emotes, exclusive streams, a Discord channel, and merch discounts. You could do the Patreon if you prefer, where you won't get the emotes, but you'll get pretty much everything else that the membership gives you. Plus, you'll get a free short story every month and a free book. This month, you may even get a game, like a full game for free, because that may or may not be releasing next week. There's also my Kofi, where if you like the look of my emotes and you would like some drawn for yourself, you can commission me to do so via my Kofi, or you can go into my Kofi shop and you can download small audiobooks of short stories I've written, if you just, miss my voice when I'm not around. And last but not least, there is my website where you can find my merch store, where you can get ebooks, first edition copies of books I've written, bookmarks, keyrings, t-shirts, a notebook, stickers, and a soft pillow. Go check out all the links, click all the things. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I can't believe we finally finished Pride and Prejudice. Now I have no idea what I'm gonna read next week. Heck yeah. But until then, I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Brandy Westbrook, Life and Death Been Library. Good.